Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Season 4 of the SFEMA Council podcast. My name is Madeline Grossi. I'm one of your co-hosts for this season, as well as the podcast administrator. Joining me, like always, we have Jackson Pretley, another co-host and producer for the podcast here. And we also have another co-host today. Dylan is joining us. He's one of the first-year reps here on SFEMA Council, and you've probably seen him in one of our other episodes as well. So super happy to have Dylan with us today, and I'm going to throw it over to Jackson to introduce our guest for today.
Thank you, Maddie. On today's episode, we have Ian Mendes. Ian is a senior writer at The Athletic for the last 2 years. Previously, Ian graduated from the University of Carleton with a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism. He had an extensive career in working in media relations department for the Ottawa Lynx Baseball Club, and has also progressed into a role with media relations manager for the Ottawa Senators, a broadcast on Sportsnet, and on-air host of TSN 1200. We welcome Ian as the 17th guest here on the SFEMA Council podcast. So Ian, first off, can you just expand on your experience in the sport industry, just some more on your roles?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. I feel like you already just laid it out, what my entire career there. And wait, did you say I'm the 17th guest?
17th.
Yeah.
Should I be flattered, honored, a little angry? Like, how should I feel about being 17th?
I think 17 is a pretty good number. So
Yeah. Okay. Because, I could look at it and say, you know what, like you didn't want me as your first, you got to want to like work out the kinks, right? You don't want to get some right away, but 17 feels about right. I like it. That feels good. Yeah, listen, I've been in this industry. It's crazy to think because the time really goes by, but like basically 20 plus years, since basically the early 2000s, I've been doing this, and I think what really makes my career a little bit unique is that I've been able to work in the front office of a team, like kind of in media relations, public relations, been able to work in television, been able to work in radio, and now kind of full-time as a writer. So I think I have a little bit, I'm one of those classic jack of all trades, probably master of none of them. But I think it's been really good, really well-rounded, and kind of, I'd like to think the ability to speak to each of those mediums kind of independently.
No, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Jackson.
I was just going to ask, like, what type of area of sports do you write in? Hockey, baseball, or just kind of
strictly hockey, and mostly on the Ottawa Senators. Like for the most part, it's Ottawa. Like I'll write some odd, kind of bigger picture cultural pieces on hockey, some stuff like that kind of could be consumed by the larger audience. For the most part, like 90% of what I write is for kind of the Ottawa audience and covering the Ottawa Senators. But yeah, pretty much all hockey that I cover now. I have covered other sports. Like when I worked in television, I was fortunate enough to do some Olympics, did a FIFA World Cup, some baseball, a whole bunch of different things. But now I'm pretty much morphed into just pretty much a hockey reporter.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And as we know, you've kind of had the opportunity to do a little bit of behind the scenes work in media and some stuff, front facing. So what did you like the most about kind of being in that front face of media and being a broadcaster and an on-air host in the sport industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because I think there's so many jobs that are behind the scenes that are great. And I don't know that enough, students really, because if you turn on let's say you turn on Sportsnet, you turn on TSN, there's a good chance you just see the reporter or the anchor. Like you don't see the dozens of people that put that show together. Right. And so I think I have a great appreciation for that side, especially having worked kind of in media relations and PR, like as a behind the scenes person. The front facing stuff, I think there's a lot of people, young reporters, that they want to get into the industry to kind of become famous, if that makes sense. And I don't I hate that. I'll be honest with you. Like I don't like that part of my job. I never did this because, I can't wait to, people to recognize who I am. I don't want that. It's an offshoot of what I do. I'm more interested in the craft of storytelling, telling stories, doing interviews. That's what I really appreciated. Like the front facing stuff, it's, it can be good and bad. And I think I was lucky where when I broke in the early 2000s, social media was there, but it was like people had like MySpace pages or whatever, right? Like I got lucky by the time like my on-air flubs that I had, when I had those, there was YouTube wasn't there, Twitter wasn't there, Facebook was really, I think, in its infancy. So really by the time I got good at my job, it was okay, well, here's social media, and it was like, oh wow, this guy's pretty good on TV. I got lucky, and I'm very mindful of being front facing, that for younger reporters, you're going to have missteps, you're going to have flubs, you're going to have mistakes that you make. And now the problem is that gets amplified far greater. Like when I had a couple of mistakes. If I made a mistake, it was just on the 6 o'clock news, and that was it. Like nobody else saw it. If you make a mistake today, it lives in infamy, right? Like it lives forever. And that's the tough thing, I think, about being a young reporter now versus when I was coming up, is that there's a lot more scrutiny on every little thing that you do as a young reporter.
Yeah, I like the idea that you brought up there about like being front facing and maybe only being a reporter because you want to be famous. Like I kind of see that or relate that to taking on different experiences and why you're doing that. And as a student, I know there's definitely going to be some opportunities that come up and people just do it for a resume, and I don't believe in that. I don't think that you should just do something so it looks good on your resume. I think you should take every opportunity and kind of change that mindset and think, what skill can I get out of this? Maybe maybe I won't like this, but it's an opportunity I tried and I don't have to do it again. And so I like the way that you said that, because I've always kind of stood behind that. You shouldn't do things just so you can write it on paper. You should go in hoping that you can get something valuable out of it.
Yeah, that's a really good philosophy and a good approach in life, is that do these experiences and see what you can learn. And like all of us can, like even now, like I don't think that there's ever a finish line. Like I don't think that I'm done learning how to be a good reporter. I don't think I'm done learning how to be a good writer, a good broadcast. Like there's no finish line, right? Like you're never going to get to some finish line like, I did it, I am now a great reporter. Like so I like that approach of always trying to better yourself, be a little bit open-minded and just learning new experiences. But you're right, not for just for the sole purposes of checking a box or like whatever, but like to actually like spend time learning the craft, like becoming a better, in my case, better communicator, better writer, like those types of things. Actually try and get yourself a little bit better.
I mean, I like the point that you made about, you were kind of thrown into it, the sports industry at the beginning of, social media and just the sport industry kind of changing the way that it was. Even like, 50, 60 years before you, people were only starting on, TV reporters. There were barely any for the sports. There's only a handful on like some main channels before it was like all radio. And so I'm just curious, do you think that there's, anything maybe in the next 20, 30 years that's going to be changing really big for the sports world that people like my graduating class type of thing are going to be thrown into as like the first kind of generation of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like it's an evolving industry. Like even like from when I came in the early 2000s, I remember graduating and feeling like I was on the doorstep of something great. Like this internet was here, and Sportsnet had just launched, and like it was like all these mainstream opportunities were opening up. That there was more jobs then than there are now, if I'm being frank. However, what's happened over the two decades is that the industry has evolved, right? I would imagine that the three of you and people that are listening to this podcast, you don't have probably traditional cable. You don't like when people talk about cord cutting generations, we can't think about cord cutting. We have to think about the generation that never was connected with a cord. Like nobody in this generation really had over the top cable. Like, so I think the thing that we're finding for this next generation is the content will never go away. Okay. The appetite for sports will never go away. There will always be an appetite to broadcast live sports, to read and hear about stories about our favorite athletes in sports. the manner in which it's being delivered is radically altering. And you know, I'm sitting here telling you this now in 2023. It wouldn't shock me if in 2028 it's completely different than the conversation we're having now. Like, you're starting to see professional sports leagues finally get away from being hesitant to you know, use streaming services. Like, I think that's the way to go. You want to grow your audience, like, why not sign partnerships for live programming with Netflix, Amazon Prime, you know, pick your
Yeah,
service.
ESPN and Disney Plus going together, making that big jump.
Right. Like that, like that's what you need to start seeing, is that leagues need to start getting ahead of this. I think the other thing you're going to see, I think you're not going to see AM talk radio is another thing that is, heck, FM talk radio. Again, let's look at your generation. Let's study your generation's habits and think about when you're at the point when you have disposable income, you're not going to be spending it on, you know, traditional media outlets, right? Like, you're
Right.
simply not going to. You did not grow up that way. So I'm really fascinated to see how content is delivered to people that right now, or let's say right now, they're between the ages of 15 and 25, and that, you know, 10 years from now, they're kind of the group that's, you know, driving the economy a little bit more. How are we getting to that group? And it's going to be interesting. I don't know where it's all headed. I think we're seeing, you know, traditional news outlets die, and you see all these journalists, you know, kind of banging their fists into the sand saying, you know, journalism is important, and it is, but the mechanism in which it's delivered is changing. Like, that's the whole key here, and it's been changing in front of our eyes for years, and I'm really curious to see where it goes in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, sports industries, you know, they're always changing. And you've been in so many different media industries, you know, writing for like the Citizen, for the Athletic, on the TSN, on Sportsnet. So I'm just wondering, is there any, you know, obviously you can't say a favorite, but any really just time that just speaks to you and you're going to remember? And is there any like skills that you think can carry among all of the different industries?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And, you know, I've been really fortunate, like, to be able to work for Sportsnet and TSN and now the Athletic and for an NHL team. Like, I'm really lucky. The one skill I would tell young people who are trying to get into this industry, whether you're trying to get in as a reporter, whether you're trying to get in as maybe a marketing officer or public relations or sales, or like whatever it is that you want to do, if you want to get into sports, be a good communicator, ideally be a good writer, but also just be a good communicator. And part of that is writing. But I think that those skills are transferable amongst all the, you know, especially writing for me. Like, writing was always my favorite thing. I love to write. Even when I was in television, I love to write. Like, be a good communicator. That it's really critical. Like, so I've enjoyed the fact that in all 4 of my jobs, I've had some element of writing and certainly some degree of communication. And the thing that I think I probably, like, if you're asking me what I like the most out of TV, radio, and print, I think radio is the most fun. Like, the most fun, because you're just having a conversation. You can kind of let your personality show, you know, kind of like this. I love that. I really miss the adrenaline rush of doing live TV. I can hardly describe it, but it's just, I miss that. I miss, like, the red light goes on and, you know, there's no safety net. And I love that. But writing is the challenge. It's such a challenge to be, you know, an effective writer, a unique writer that every day, or, you know, I probably write 4 or 5 times a week. Every story's got to look different. Everything can't be repetitive. It's a challenge. And so I love all 3 of them in a unique way. And if I could do all 3 of them, and I'm lucky, I kind of get a chance to do all 3 of them now. But if I could just do all 3 of them, you know, for the foreseeable future, I'd be super, super happy.
It's interesting because I think in this world of like social media, communication is hard for a lot of people because they're so used to communicating online or using acronyms or not being as professional or all those sorts of things. I think well, the 3 of us here, we have an interest in you know, podcasting and speaking, so I think we get a little more practice than others. But people who are younger than us, I think they'll have a hard time coming into university and the professional world and not really having been exposed to that that very much. And growing up in this world of social media it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, you know what? Like I'm in the middle of reading a book. It's called The Chaos Machine, and it's just a look at how social media has not only obviously impacted media and our democracy really in so many ways, but just our day-to-day interactions, how they've just evolved. And really, you're the first generation that is coming out of, like, you grew up probably at 13, 14 years old, starting to understand social media was a way to connect. And now by the time most kids are 12, they have a phone, they have a device, they communicate with their friends that way. It's going to be a real bonus for anybody who's right now probably under the age of 25. If you can communicate in the manner in which the three of you are communicating right now, which is very clear, very personable, engaging conversation, like it's very obvious to me, the three of you, okay, well, these three are very comfortable speaking. There's no hesitation in your voices. Like, this sounds like a normal conversation. You're going to have a significant leg up, I think, on a lot of your peers who have struggled to find that ability to, like, look, being a teenager and being in your early 20s, it's the most challenging time of your lives at the best of times, right? Like, it's really hard. It's really hard being a young person. But I think it's infinitely harder being a young person today. I do. Like, I think the job, I even talked about the job market's more difficult for you. Trying to buy a house, like, I'm sure you probably get agitated. You hear your stories of your parents or your grandparents are like, well, when I turned 22, I bought my first house and it was $19,000. You're like, get out of here. Like, I don't want to hear your stories. And now you fold all of that in with the fact that, like, your generation has a much more difficult time communicating. And I think that's going to be such a great skill to have. Be personable, be a communicator, be able to have those interpersonal skills that are going to be, I still think those are always going to be important in the business world.
No, for sure. And then you're talking about speaking. So I believe one of your roles that we didn't touch on in the intro, you can't speak during. So we did find that you were a mascot for Ottawa's old AAA baseball team. Can you elaborate on this and let us know how you got into that role?
Okay, before I do, I need to know, show of hands. Well, I can't do show of hands. Well, because this is an audio podcast, right? So
yep, audio and video.
Oh, and video. Okay, well, I guess the viewers could see this. But show of hands, or who's been a mascot here of any kind? The three of you. Any of you have any mascot? Really?
Not like a traditional mascot. I've dressed up for like theme nights for sporting events, but not like in an actual mascot suit. I've been in like a taco suit, a pizza suit, but not in an actual mascot.
But wait, taco pizza suit for what?
One of the baseball teams I worked for, we did, like, I'm sure you've heard of the Savannah Bananas, so they try to do something like that. So we do a pizza giveaway. So I'd have to run through the stands with a full pizza and a pizza suit.
Okay, I hate to break it to you, but you've been a mascot.
Not traditional, but
the exact definition of a mascot is dressing up in front of people and running around. And you're like, no, I've never been.
So then, technically, yes, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I was Lenny the Lynx, the mascot, but never in it was two times. One time was just in an in-game promotion. They needed somebody to run, like, you had to do like a race around the bases with a kid. And, it's the classic, you get out to an early lead and then you let the kid come and beat you at the end. I was at the point where I was like, the kid already, I didn't have to even pretend to lose. Like, the kid just beat me straight up. Like, that wasn't the problem. But the only other time I was the mascot was, it was for a Santa Claus parade in Ottawa. And they asked me to ride a fire truck and wave to kids as the mascot, but the truck never showed up. And I had to walk 3 kilometers or whatever it was.
And like the minus 35 weather.
It wasn't too bad. It was November. It was like end of November. It must have been around, it wasn't too bad. It was like around 0.
Okay.
But I had to walk and I didn't have proper shoes because I was wearing like the cartoon mascot red shoes, thinking like, I don't need to wear sneakers. I had to walk like 3 kilometers in that. And it was, it was not fun, but I never got to actually be like a mascot for like a full game or like a kid's birthday party or like anything like that.
How did the suit smell?
You know what? It's a good question. Now that you think about nothing jumps out to me that to make
Okay.
me think like it was terrible. Like, because if it was, I'm sure I would have remembered, but it was November, right? So, I
I
mean, that
guess you weren't
costume must have
sweating
been,
in it that much. Yeah.
yeah, but it also like that costume was sitting around for like 3 months. Like nobody wore it. So maybe I don't know. Hopefully somebody Febrezed it. And I put it on, but no, I don't remember it being too bad. It was tough to
Okay.
breathe, but I don't remember the smell being off.
Yeah. And then we've talked about this a little bit, but we know you're from the Ottawa area, and you've had the chance to work with some different Ottawa teams. Do you have a favorite team to watch or follow? Doesn't have to be in the Ottawa area, but it might be because you're there.
Yeah. So like one of the weird things about working in sports, which is it's great and it's bad, is the minute you become kind of working in the industry, you lose your like traditional fandom. Like
Mhm.
you don't, it's hard to describe. You end up now, like as a reporter, I don't cheer for teams anymore so much as like one of the nice things, you get to know the players, you get to know the athletes, and you end up kind of pulling for them. Like I was wanted to see Daniel Alfredson played a long time in Ottawa. Like I wanted to see him win a Stanley Cup. Jason Spezza is another guy that was always good to me. Like I wanted to see those guys do really well and win a Stanley Cup. But like cheering for a team, it's so different when you work in the industry. Like I feel like I can't, like even if I stop working tomorrow, I lose my job or something happens tomorrow, I feel like I don't know that I'll ever go back to being like in hockey anyway, like a fan that like roots for a team, so to speak. It's hard to describe, but now in saying that, I am still a huge diehard, never miss a game Dallas Cowboys fan. So I love the NFL. I can still cheer like a fan because I'm not really connected to the NFL like from a journalistic standpoint. So I feel like there's enough separation where I can cheer for them and it doesn't kind of taint my objectivity or anything like that. But I picked a stupid team to cheer for, and we're
Trust
like
me,
on 30 years
there's
now
worse
without
teams.
winning.
There's
So
way worse teams as a Lions fan.
okay,
Definitely,
there you go.
definitely than the Cowboys.
You know.
Yeah, so I mean, back to the NHL. I hate to stray away from football. I know we have a lot of football listeners, but the playoff race coming down to the wire. I'm curious if this answer might change if I asked you before the 5-0 Blackhawks game. But who are your picks for the two remaining wild card spot? And is there anything that separates them? They just want to put them over the top?
Wow, there's like 6 teams. Like I think Detroit's kind of out of it now, but there's like 6 teams that can realistically make the playoffs, and there's only 2 spots. Like if you're asking me to pick with my heart, I want to see Ottawa and Buffalo because those are 2 cities and franchises. They've missed the playoffs for so many. Buffalo hasn't made the playoffs since 2011. So you're talking about like 12 years of, like for all 3 of you, that's like pretty much what, half your life, more than half your life of not seeing.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Ottawa hasn't made the playoffs in 6 years. That's a pretty long time. So given where these 2 fan bases are, I'd love to see them make it. That's my heart. My head, I know Pittsburgh's making it because I've seen this movie too often. So Pittsburgh's going to make it. And something tells me either Florida or the Islanders. They have a little bit more older teams. Something tells me those 2 teams, one of them will make it, and Ottawa and Buffalo will like kind of miss by a hair.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brock University here, we're only located about half an hour away from KeyBank there. So I know a lot of people listening are going to hope that the Sabres do get one of those spots.
Yeah, it's fun. Some of my roommates went over the other day. But Ian, we've had a great conversation here today, and we've learned so much about you and the sports industry and everything that you've been able to accomplish. So on behalf of Jackson, Dylan, and I, we thank you for joining us and having this conversation with us today. But we always like to give the guest the final word and the floor before we end it off. So thank you again. It was so great to hear about your story and the sports industry, and the floor is yours.
Wow, this is a lot of pressure. This is like back on TV. No, you know what? I'd like to first of all, Jackson, Madeline, and Dylan, thanks so much for having me and for reaching out. And it's really important that those of us that have made it in the sports industry, a lot of it was hard work, a lot of it was luck. Like a lot of it was luck. And the one thing I'd like to leave your viewers or listeners with is make sure you reach out to people that have made it, whether it's myself or other people, because we owe a lot back to the industry, right? So when young students reach out, I try really hard to get back to them, give them some advice. And the one piece of advice I would leave all three of you with, and I don't know what it is you want to get into in your particular careers, but my one piece of advice is don't set a deadline on yourself. You know, don't ever say like, hey, by the time I'm 25, I want to be doing this, or I'm 30, I'm doing this, or 30. Your break might come tomorrow. Your break might come in 6 years or 15 years. Like, you have no control over when it's going to come. But if you keep doing the work, it'll come. And I got really fortunate. My break came early, but I'm always mindful of that. I'm always mindful of how difficult it is, how daunting it is to be a student and thinking about your employment and all that stuff. And my only piece of advice I would leave to you and your fellow students would be, yeah, just be patient with yourselves, and the world is going to put a ton of pressure on you. Don't add any more on your own shoulders.
No,
Good advice. Thanks, Ian.
Great advice. Well, thank you, Ian, and it was a
Yeah.
great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, listen, I know Madeline has my contact info, and I'm sure Dylan, whatever. If you guys just reach, if you have any questions, you need any help, you need somebody to open a door for you, something, don't hesitate to reach out.
Will do. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ian.
Thank you.